Welcome back, trainers. I am your champion, Ronan, and today I have a question I'd like to ask you. Do you like mystery by chance? I know I do. You like adding little wrinkles to your brain? Well, I thought it would be fun for us to take a look at 10 things within the Pokemon franchise that haven't quite been answered yet. 10 big mysteries. And kind of speculate, wrinkle our brain a little bit on these subjects. Starting off, we're going to be talking about one of the longest standing mysteries within the Pokemon franchise, all the way back from the first games, Red and Blue, Yellow and Green, or Cantonian War.
War never changes.
Well, assuming Kanto was in it. We know Lieutenant Surge was in the war, and we know that he's from America, which I'm assuming that means he's from Unova. But what was the war? Well, I've actually thought myself before that maybe it's just supposed to be a vague allegory for World War II. And while I was doing research on this subject, I actually found someone on Reddit that proposes a good theory that kind of leads to what I'm talking about. So let's take a look at that. So I'll go say the Pokemon War Lieutenant Surge was in during Red and Blue was World War, which that's pretty much what I've thought for the longest time, since there's nothing else that really correlates. We haven't been given any other information, so World War II kind of makes the most sense, since it is the most prolific war in Japan's history. Proof: all the mentions on real life in the Pokedex entries in Red and Blue, like the Eiffel Tower and Indian Elephant, so much more. The name Kanto is from a real prefecture in Japan, which the region was based on, which is true. These are real life locations, and Pokemon Red and Blue did make mention to things like the Eiffel Tower and Indian elephants. They have info on the moon landing in the museum, which is true. They have very specific dates. As the series went on, it went further and further from real life. They stopped mentioning real places. There is no Eiffel Tower, it's Prism Tower. No Paris, France, it's Lumio City, Kalos. It has its own fictional history vaguely based on real life too. I don't know if this implies anything about Red and Blue now that things are much different. Lots of Pokemon that control time, the universe, and alternate universe shenanigans going on through. So who knows? I'm not trying to be a buzzkill for people having fun writing theories on it either. It's just interesting to know that Pokemon want less and less based on real life things over the years. The idea here is whenever Pokemon was starting out in the games, they made Pokemon Red and Blue, and they made the sequel to those, Pokemon Gold and Silver, but, you know, I'm sure that originally they were unsure on whether or not these games were going to continue to be a franchise. So in the beginning, they made the decision to reference real life things. And as the series has gone on, I'm sure they've probably realized, oh, you know, it's probably not smart to tie our franchise and our universe to the real life world, because then that has messy implications that we're not going to think of off the top of our head. Alright, next question I'd like to ask. What was the rest of Tobias's team in his fight against Ash? We all remember Tobias. We all remember the absolute throttling that Ash got in that fight and how absolutely unfair and out of left field that shit was. But that leaves it to question. We only saw 2 of his Pokemon, and I imagine that his team was prepared to pull up on the champion, which we know he still would have lost if he had fought her, because her record was still undefeated up to that point, I'm pretty sure. So, what is Tobias's champion team? Obviously, we have Darkrai, we have Latios, but like I said before, we don't know what the other 4 Pokemon are. Now, whenever it came to deciding what the rest of his team was, it was a little hard, but ultimately, I decided that, you know, most of these trainers have a theme that they go based off of, and he just straight up looks like Darkrai. But his second Pokemon isn't a Dark type, it's a Latios. So I don't think, personally, he would have a team of full legendaries. I feel like Tobias is the type of trainer that just goes 100% out the gate. He doesn't hold any punches, and that's the reason why we saw both Darkrai and Latios. Darkrai being his strongest Pokemon, his main Pokemon, which is why he looks like it. Latios being his second strongest Pokemon. I think Latios would be his only legendary, or his only other legendary aside from Darkrai, and the rest of his team would consist of Gyarados, Scizor, Dusknoir, and Emboar. Now, the first 3 Pokemon that I mentioned are there mostly because of a cool factor. I think the theme that Tobias would fit is kind of like a dark, edgy, cool theme. And Gyarados is cool, Scizor is really cool, Dusknoir is really cool, and they're all Pokemon that weren't represented super heavily by a main trainer. Obviously, Lance has his Gyaradoses, but I thought Gyarados would be a good addition to a trainer's team to be very intimidating looking. And the last Pokemon being Emboar, I know that might seem like a little bit of a weird choice, but the reason why I chose it is because Pokemon in the anime has a tendency to showcase Pokemon that will be in the next generation, and this being one of the final fights within Diamond and Pearl would have been a perfect time to showcase a new Pokemon. And Emboar is kind of the toughest looking of the 3, and I think it would have been the perfect decision to be Tobias's starter Pokemon. Plus, if you paid attention to the team composition that I decided to make, everything is decently balanced. I think Tobias would have a good, strong, balanced team. Alright, question number 3. Who is Ash's father? So, before we talk about the main subject, let's talk about a few other candidates who people like to often put as Ash's father. First, we have Professor Oak. Professor Oak lives very close to Mrs. Ketchum, and on top of that, throughout several instances in the series, we see Oak and Ash's mom very close together, eating dinner, doing travel, being in Oak's office. So the implication is there that maybe Professor Oak has made the moves on Ash's mom. Another big choice that people make is Giovanni. Now, Giovanni is known to actually have history with Ash's mom around the time that Ash's mom would have been pregnant with Ash. However, Ash's mom and Giovanni had a rough breakup, if I remember correctly, and so it's unsure. The implication is there. They both have the same hair color, they both have striking eyes, they both have a fiery passion for battle. So there is the chance that Giovanni is Ash's father, but it's very unlikely. Let me ask you this, viewer. Who does Ash's mom spend the most time with? That's right. It's the mime. Now, there are quite a few fans out there who have made the theory that Ash's mom and Mr. Mime are potentially bumping uglies. But Ash being a human Pokemon hybrid, potentially the first, I'm pretty sure, doesn't seem like a plot line that the series really wants to go with that has a lot of, again, dirty implications. So this is my least favorite, for sure. Definitely up there with the Pokemon that will not be named. But there are a lot of fans who think that Mr. Mime might potentially be it. Jokingly, hopefully, but there are some that go for it. And now on to the most popular candidate. Silver from Pokemon Chronicles. Like I mentioned with Giovanni, Silver from Pokemon Chronicles is a lot like Ash in the fact that he has dark colored hair. Now granted, they're not the same hair color, but whenever he was younger, he did have darker hair. It was supposed to be portrayed as black, I'm pretty sure, but it was colored like a gray color, like a silver color like him, but his hair was darker, but it also does have this striking, wild look to it, just like Ash. On top of that, he has this knack for having no patience and always has to be on the go. He's always on his feet. He's always ready for the next adventure. And he has a Pokemon that rides on his shoulder outside of its Pokeball, just like Ash. Now, it was never explicitly said that this is Ash's father, but this was heavily implied within the series. And we do know that Ash's father is alive thanks to a somewhat recent episode where Ash just barely missed his father and his mother in like a small reunion together. So we do know that Ash's father is alive, but will we ever see him? Probably not. Mystery number 4, viewer, and this is more of a gripe. Why did they drop the ball so hard on Crystal Onyx? Like, there have been several instances since, what, Generation 7? Generation 7 is whenever regional variants were introduced. So it's been a hot minute, and they've had plenty opportunity in order to give us the Crystal Onyx variant that so many of us have been fervently screaming for, but they still haven't done it yet. But what if they did? Well, I think it would be both Ice and Steel type in order to keep in theme with its 4x weakness, but I think it should get a new ability that would damage the opponent anytime it takes damage by physical moves. Maybe the opponent would take like half damage, like an auto counter or something, but instead of double damage, it would half the damage instead. And this would be there to deter most fighting type Pokemon from going after the Crystal Onyx, since it would be 4x weak to fighting. Now, I know what you're thinking. Well, it's also 4x weak to fire as well. We could make the hidden ability heat proof, and that would fix that problem. What about its stats though? Should it be exactly the same as regular Onyx? I think this Crystal Onyx would be quite similar to regular Onyx, where its stats would be pretty abysmal except for one stat. Its defense and special defense would change, so it would have 160 special defense and 45 defense, and it would have a new evolution. What this new evolution would be, I don't know. You can come up with that down in the comment section below. I think instead of super defensive like Steelix, the evolution of Crystal Onyx would obviously be super hyper offensive. What do Diglett's and Dugtrio's feet look like? Like, we know that they have feet. That has been confirmed. If anything, even if it's not in a main series game, it has been confirmed in a side game in Pokemon Mystery Dungeon Red Rescue Team. In the beginning of Red Rescue Team Mystery Dungeon, you're sent on a mission to go rescue a Diglett, and it is confirmed within that mission that Diglett does indeed have feet. Don't know what those feet look like yet. Maybe it looks something like this, or maybe something like this, but we don't know. One day, maybe Diglett, instead of evolving into a Dugtrio, will have a divergent evolution and will sprout out of the ground, and he'll be swole or something. Be like the Diglett meme. Dear trainer, have you ever asked yourself, what is inside of a fortress shell? Bet you haven't. But if you think about it, fortress isn't the Pokemon. That is a shell. The Pokemon's on the inside. And for proof, let's take a look at Fortress's Pokedex entry. Fortress's Pokedex entry states, its entire body is shielded by a steel hard shell. What lurks inside the armor is a total mystery. But dear viewer, dear trainer, rather, I'd like to ask you this. What if it evolved? What if Fortress evolved? I think if it did, it should become maybe a pure bug type again, like Pineco was. But instead of being a bulky Pokemon, it's going to be an extremely hard-hitting fast cannon on both the physical and the special side. Something kind of like Infernape, but for bug types. And the reason why I mention this is because let's take a look one more time at Fortress's Pokedex entry. If you'll take a look at Ruby and Sapphire, it says Fortress conceals itself inside its hardened, steel shell. The shell is opened when the Pokemon is catching prey, but it does so at such a quick pace that the shell's inside cannot be seen. So whatever is living inside the shell of Fortress, whatever Fortress actually is actually an extremely fast Pokemon. So fast that it cannot be seen by the human eye. So, how would we evolve our Fortress? I think we could do something quite similar to a Scavalier and a Selgor, where we trade our Fortress away to somebody in exchange for a very specific Pokemon, and in doing so, the Fortress gives its armor away to that Pokemon. Maybe a Pokemon that is defenseless and needs a shell, needs the defense. So Fortress, being the kind guy that he is, gives the shell away to said Pokemon, and in turn, evolves and turns into its final form, where it's just this strong glass cannon that hits super hard, this pure bug type. Kind of like low kicks, but just a little bit better. What is the connection between Arceus and Unknown. Now, we all know that Unknown is kind of a unknown entity. It's a very odd Pokemon that kind of just exists, and we don't ever hardly see it. We see it in a few games, and in those few games, it's hardly ever relevant. In the game that it feels most relevant, aside from the games that are introduced in, is Legends Arceus. In Arceus' Pokedex entry, it mentions shaping the world with its 1,000 arms. But we never see any promotional image of Arceus with 1,000 arms. Not in games, not in movies, not in posters, at least not that I could find. If it's out there, then I guess I just missed it. But as far as I'm aware, there's not really anything out there with Arceus with 1,000 arms, probably because that would be a pain in the ass to draw. But what if Arceus used Unknown as its 1,000 arms, as its proverbial 1,000 arms? Meaning it uses Unknown to will things into existence. We see that Unknown has the ability to do this in the third movie by bringing Entei into existence for Molly. So, Arceus uses Unknown to bring everything else into existence. Also, side note, Unknown's only move is Hidden Power. A move that can be every single type, just like Arceus. So it's just another small thing that connects them together. Who knows? Okay, so we need to talk about the logistical issues with both, I wanted to tie these both together, both Cubone and Kangaskhan as Pokemon. Pretty much every single Pokedex entry. Because it never moves its skull helmet, no one's ever seen the Pokemon's real face. It's either no one's ever seen its real face, or where's the skulls of its deceased mother? Its cry echoes inside the skull, and it comes out as a sad melody. Every single Pokedex entry is, it's sad or lonely, it wears a skull, its mother's dead. Yeah, here we go. Pokemon Crystal. It lost its mother after its birth. It wears its mother's skull, never revealing its true face. So that leads me to question, do Marowaks just die after giving birth? But there's the thing is, Pokemon don't give birth, they lay eggs. So are Marowak just inept at laying eggs? Like as soon as they lay an egg or right after they lay an egg, they die? Or immediately after their Cubone hatches out of the egg, they kill themselves to give their skull to the Cubone for protection? Like, it doesn't make logistical sense, because there's no way there's not adult Cubones that haven't had eggs, right? And then we move on to Kangaskhan. If you hatch an egg, if you hatch a Kangaskhan egg, when that Kangaskhan hatches, it has a baby already inside of its pouch. How is that possible? What is the baby Kangaskhan? Is it actually a Kangaskhan? We see in the anime several times that it's actually a sentient living Pokemon, but what is it? If anything, it more closely resembles the substitute doll, but it's not. It's an actual Pokemon as far as we can tell. Game Freak, we need an answer. Do something with the baby. Make it grow up. Make it move out. One question I've always had is, how are the Pokemon able to understand each other, right? Like, obviously, made a series, it's made up, it's all fantasy, obviously. But if it's supposed to be predicated off of real life, am I to assume that dogs and cats and birds and squirrels can all communicate with each other? Because I would always assume that squirrels speak squirrel and dogs speak dog, right? And those two things are not mutually exclusive. But Pokemon not only understand the language of their own species, but pretty much every other Pokemon species. We see them interacting and knowing what each other is saying. And they also understand the language of people. Now granted, that's probably from just like living by people for so long, but still yet, Pokemon, if you think about it, are at the very least trilingual. I mean, not even trilingual, there's fucking over 1,000 Pokemon, so how many ever 1,014 Pokemon there are, how many ever lingual that is, that's how many lingual Pokemon are. One other the qualifications to becoming a gym leader? Now, obviously, I'm the champion already, so this doesn't really qualify for me, but for posterity's sake, let's think about it. What does a gym leader need to qualify to be a gym leader? Do they need to already have a type-themed team? Do they need to be a trainer that's walking around with 6 bug Pokemon to be the bug-type gym leader? Or are they given their Pokemon or their type to be a gym leader over after given their position? And obviously, it's the Pokemon League itself that hires these people as gym leaders, but how does the Pokemon League find these trainers? Are they just sending out scouts to go walk around and then stalk these trainers and all their accolades? Like, imagine if instead of an intergalactic or whatever he was supposed to be, interworld policeman, Booker was just a stalker and he's just following Ash around after every single one of his battles, reporting, oh yes, Ash's Pikachu defeated a Zapdos. Like, that'd be a little weird. So I really question how these trainers become prolific if there are no gyms in the first place. I guess people just be scrapping out there. If you guys liked the video, don't forget to hit the like button. Don't forget to subscribe if you'd like to see more content like this. And I will see you guys in the next video.